My dad publicly shamed me after years of manipulating me and living off my money. So I disappeared, and he faced consequences he never saw coming. I, 34 male, need to paint you a picture of what growing up with my father Juan was like. Imagine the most entitled, narcissistic Mexican you've ever met, then multiply that by 10. This dude genuinely believed the world owed him everything while he contributed nothing. We lived in a decent middle-class house in Narvartmi, my parents and my 3 younger brothers Gonzalo, Simon, and Dario. But here's the thing about Dad. He treated that house like his personal kingdom and the rest of us like his subjects. Dude worked as a gardener when he felt like it, which was maybe 3 days a week on a good month. Here's the level of petty we're dealing with. This man had a coffee ritual so specific it would make a Starbucks barista walk out perfect water secret mug and zero tolerance for mistakes. But the real fun started with how he treated me versus my brothers. See, Gonzalo was the golden child because he could crack jokes and kiss ass. Simon got praised for every mediocre soccer play like he was heading to the national team. Dario was the baby so he could do no wrong. Me, I was the family scapegoat from day one. Pedro, you're such a pendo. Look how quiet you are. What kind of man doesn't speak up? You're going to be a loser your whole life if you keep acting like this. This started when I was literally 7 years old. 7. What kind of father tells a second grader he's going to be a failure? The psychological damage was systematic and deliberate. While my brothers got bedtime stories, I got lectures about how disappointed he was in me. While they got help with homework, I got criticized for not figuring things out myself. Real men don't need help, he'd say. Then turn around and spend an hour helping Simon with basic math that I'd mastered years earlier. By 12, I was basically running the household, getting my brothers ready for school, helping Mom with groceries, making sure homework got done. Dad would come home from his part-time gardening gig and immediately start barking orders like he'd been working construction for 16 hours. Pedro, why isn't dinner ready? Pedro, your brothers are being too loud. Pedro, clean up this pinch mess. Never mind that I was a kid too. I was his personal assistant and punching bag rolled into one. The worst part was how he'd undermine everything I did. Maid honor roll, big deal, school's easy, wait until the real world kicks your ass. Helped Mom with bills using money from my part-time job. Stop trying to be the man of the house, you're just a kid playing dress-up. I remember one specific incident when I was about 14. I'd saved up money from my weekend job helping at a local electronics shop to buy Mom a small gift for Mother's Day. Just a cheap bracelet from the market, but I was proud of earning the money myself. When Dad saw it, he snatched it away and examined it like he was some kind of jewelry expert. This cheap garbage? You're embarrassing the family giving your mother junk like this. What's she going to tell the neighbors when they see her wearing this plastic nonsense? Then he threw it in the trash right in front of me. Mom tried to fish it out later, but the damage was done. I learned that day that nothing I did would ever be good enough for this man. High school was when things really went south. Every achievement got twisted into proof that I was somehow deficient. The dating comment turned out to be prophetic, because guess what happened? She did leave partially because family dinners with Dad were like visiting prison. Dude would grill any girl I brought home like she was applying for a visa, then make jokes about how she could do better. I'll never forget bringing home my first serious girlfriend, Carmen, when I was 17. She was smart funny and actually seemed to like me despite my family's dysfunction. Dad took one look at her and immediately launched into interrogation mode. So, Carmen, what does your father do for work? Oh, he owns a small business. That's nice. Pedro here thinks he's going to be some big shot too. But between you and me, he doesn't have what it takes to run anything. Too soft, you know. But I'm sure you've noticed that already. The girl was 17 years old, and this grown man was trying to convince her to dump his own son. Carmen lasted about 3 months before she couldn't handle the constant undermining anymore. Your dad really seems to hate you, she told me before breaking up. It's actually kind of scary to watch. Meanwhile, my brothers were getting the red carpet treatment for literally breathing. Gonzalo tells a stupid joke. Dad's cracking up like it's Eugenio Derbez. Simon scores a goal in some random game. You'd think he just won the World Cup. Dario gets a C on a test. That's my boy, you're doing great. But here's where it gets really messed up. Dad started using my brothers as weapons against me. Why can't you be funny like Gonzalo? Why don't you play soccer like Simon? Even Dario has more personality than you. Constant comparisons designed to make me feel like the defective one. The really twisted part was how he'd pit us against each other without them even realizing it. He'd tell Gonzalo that I was jealous of his sense of humor. Tell Simon that I resented his athletic ability. Tell Dario that I thought I was better than him because of my grades. Classic divide and conquer strategy that kept us from bonding as brothers. I threw myself into school and work because it was the only place I felt competent. Graduated near the top of my class, got into electrical work, landed a decent entry-level job right out of university. None of it mattered to Dad, though. Electrical work, that's not real work. Real men build things with their hands. You're going to spend your whole life playing with wires. This from a guy who couldn't hold down a steady gardening job and had never built anything more complicated than a sandwich. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Here I was literally working with my hands every day, installing electrical systems, troubleshooting complex wiring problems, doing actual skilled labor that required years of training. But because it wasn't the specific type of manual labor he approved of, it didn't count. Meanwhile, this dude spent most of his days watching TV and criticizing everyone else's work ethic. The gaslighting was incredible, too. He'd say something completely vicious. Then, when I got upset suddenly, I was too sensitive and can't take a joke. By 25, I'd worked my way up to electrical supervisor at a solid mid-sized company in Polanco. Good salary, decent benefits. Actually felt proud of what I'd accomplished. That's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I decided to move back home temporarily to help with family expenses. Work was actually pretty rewarding during this period. I was specializing in commercial installations, office buildings, retail spaces, small factories. There's something satisfying about designing an electrical system from scratch. I was good at it too. Had developed a reputation for getting complex jobs done on time and under budget. Dad's work situation had gotten worse. He was barely bringing in anything and had started blaming everyone else for his problems. The economy's rigged against honest workers. All these foreigners are taking the good jobs. Classic victim mentality while doing nothing to improve his situation. Mom's arthritis was getting bad, so she couldn't sew as much. Bills were piling up, house was falling apart, and my brothers were all focused on their own lives. So I stepped in like the responsible oldest son and started covering the major expenses: mortgage, electricity, water, gas, car payments. I was basically funding the entire household, while Dad took full credit for being the provider. He'd tell the neighbors and friends about his house and his bills like he was some successful patriarch instead of a deadbeat living off his son. Neighbors probably thought he was rich, but behind the curtain it was me working 50-hour weeks while he played patriarch. The entitlement was unreal. Not only did he expect me to pay for everything, he acted like I owed him even more. "Pedro, the cable bill went up. You need to cover the difference." Not asking, telling like I was his personal ATM instead of his son doing him a massive favor. But here's the really sick part. The more I helped, the more he resented me. Every bill I paid was apparently proof that he was losing control of his household, so the insults got worse, not better. "Look at Pedro. Thinks he runs this house now. Thinks his money makes him better than his old man." Dude, I'm literally keeping you from being homeless, and this is how you react. The financial control became another weapon in his psychological arsenal. He'd make expensive purchases without consulting anyone, then expect me to cover the shortfall: new TV, expensive groceries, repairs for things that weren't really broken. Anything to assert his dominance and remind me that he was still the man of the house, even though I was paying for everything. The dating situation became impossible around this time. How do you explain to someone that you're 28 years old, successful, but living with your parents because you're supporting them financially? Plus, Dad would still sabotage any relationship I tried to build. One girl I really liked came over for dinner, and Dad spent the whole night making comments about how I was married to my job and probably going to die alone like my grandfather. She never called me back. But the worst part was when Dad's truck broke down. This piece of junk finally gave up after years of neglect. And suddenly, it was my problem to solve. He comes to me talking about how he needs a reliable vehicle for work, how this is going to destroy the family financially if he can't get around. The truck situation was actually hilarious in retrospect. This beat-up Ford pickup had been held together with duct tape and prayers for the last 5 years. The engine leaked more oil than it burned. The transmission slipped so bad it was basically decorative. And the electrical system was so screwed up that half the lights didn't work. Any reasonable person would have put it out of its misery years ago. But Dad kept driving it because real men fix their own vehicles. Of course, fixing in Dad's vocabulary meant ignoring problems until they became catastrophic, then blaming everyone else when the inevitable breakdown happened. The final straw was when the engine literally caught fire while he was driving to one of his rare landscaping jobs. Fire department had to put it out. Tow truck hauled it to the scrapyard, and suddenly Dad was stranded without transportation. So like an idiot, I gave him 240,000 pesos for a down payment on a used pickup truck and co-signed the loan for another 160,000 pesos. A total of 400,000 pesos to get him wheels. Did he thank me? Hell no. He acted like I owed him a vehicle because that's what sons do for their fathers. I have all the WhatsApp messages from that time too. Him begging me to help out the family, promising he'd pay me back when things get better, talking about how this is just temporary until he gets back on his feet. All lies, but I kept the evidence. Dad's behavior at family gatherings became absolutely unbearable. Every wedding, birthday party, or holiday was an opportunity for him to publicly humiliate me while playing the concerned father act. Pedro's 30 now, and still no girlfriend. I keep telling him he needs to get out more, but he's always working. I worry about him ending up alone, said his fake sympathetic voice while his eyes were practically gleaming with satisfaction. The worst was when my cousin got engaged. Dad stood up during the toast and said, "It's great to see young people finding love. Some people are natural at relationships, others." Then he looked right at me and shrugged like I was some hopeless case. The engagement party was particularly brutal because Dad had been drinking and his filter was completely gone. He spent the entire evening making loud observations about everyone's relationships while pointedly excluding me from any positive comments. Look at Roberto, found himself a beautiful wife, and Carlos there. 2 kids already building a real legacy. Even young Miguel has a girlfriend now. Then he'd pause dramatically and scan the room until his eyes landed on me. Some people are just built different, I guess. Not everyone's cut out for family life. The implication was clear to everyone in the room, and the awkward silences that followed were deafening. My brothers started joining in too, probably because they saw Dad rewarding that behavior. Pedro's married to his voltmeter became their running joke. Pedro's so boring he probably talks to electrical panels. Real comedy gold there, guys. My cousin Maria was one of the few people who saw through this garbage. She'd moved to Guadalajara for university and rarely came back for family stuff, but when she did, she'd always pull me aside afterward. "Pedro, you know none of what he says is true, right?" she told me after one particularly brutal Christmas gathering. "You're the most responsible person in this whole family. Everyone knows it, even if they won't admit it." Maria was different from the rest of our relatives. She'd actually called Dad out when he got too nasty even as a kid. "Uncle Juan, that's mean," she'd say when he'd start in on me. Most adults just laughed along or stayed quiet, but not Maria. "Honestly, I don't know how you put up with it," she continued. "If someone talked to me the way he talks to you, I'd be gone so fast it'd make their head spin. This Pinche guy thinks he's some kind of king when he's really just a freeloader with delusions of grandeur." I appreciated her support, but back then, I still believed family meant putting up with whatever garbage they dished out. I wish I'd listened to her sooner. The breaking point was building for months before that final dinner. I'd started having panic attacks before family gatherings, literally dreading spending time with people who were supposed to love me. My work performance was suffering because I was constantly stressed about money and family drama. I was basically living to serve other people's needs while my own life fell apart. Things imploded when Aunt Carmen decided to throw this massive family reunion at her house in Del Valle. I'm talking about 35-plus people crammed into her house. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, the whole extended family circus. Everyone's bringing their wives, husbands, kids. Even teenagers are showing up with their boyfriends and girlfriends. I showed up alone, obviously, and Dad immediately starts with his greatest hits. Even 15-year-old Lucas has a girlfriend tonight. "Pedro, you're really setting the bar low here." This in front of my teenage cousin, by the way, who looked mortified that he was being used as ammunition against me. But Dad was just getting warmed up. Throughout the night, he kept making these loud observations designed to draw attention to my single status. "Wow, look at all these happy couples. Pedro, you must feel like a third wheel at your own family gathering." The really sick part was how he'd deliver these comments with this fake sympathetic voice, like he was concerned about my well-being instead of systematically destroying my self-esteem in front of everyone I'd ever cared about. What made it worse was watching other family members' reactions. Some looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. Others actually seemed to enjoy the show, like Dad's cruelty was entertainment for them. A few even chimed in with their own observations about my perpetual single status. Dinner time arrives and Aunt Carmen suggests everyone make a toast. Standard family gathering stuff, people talking about their blessings, their kids, how grateful they are. I'm sitting there hoping this whole thing wraps up soon so I can go home and recover from another evening of humiliation. Then, Dad stands up glass in hand and I immediately knew something terrible was coming. He starts with the usual family is everything nonsense, talking about his sons who've made something of themselves and built real lives. Then he pivots to the kill shot. But I have to ask Pedro, my eldest son, tell me something. What does it feel like to be a complete failure without a wife and without children? Look at yourself, 34 years old and still pathetically alone. Even the children at this table have more of a life than you do. The entire room exploded. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone's cracking up like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. My brothers are losing their minds laughing. Even some of the kids are giggling because the adults are reacting like it's hilarious. Mom's staring at her plate like she wants to disappear into the floor. The few people who aren't laughing look uncomfortable. But nobody, and I mean nobody, tells Dad to knock it off. I'm sitting there feeling like I'm going to throw up watching my entire extended family enjoy my public humiliation. And Dad's just standing there with this triumphant smirk, waiting for me to take it like I always do. That moment stretched out forever. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel every pair of eyes in the room focused on me, waiting to see how I'd react to being completely destroyed in front of everyone I'd grown up with. That's when something inside me finally snapped. I stood up so fast my chair fell. The laughter died immediately because everyone could see I wasn't playing along this time. I grabbed my glass, held it up, and said the words that felt like molten lava coming out of my mouth. You know what, Dad, I'm going to make a toast too. I toast to not being a pincha freeloader. Tell me something. What does it feel like to be a 60-year-old man who can't pay his own bills? What does it feel like knowing that this failure is the only reason you're not living under a bridge? And what does it feel like knowing that this failure is about to stop paying for your worthless existence? Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Dad went from smug to confused to absolutely furious in about 3 seconds. Everyone else just sat there trying to process what they just heard because apparently none of them knew I was bankrolling my parents' entire lifestyle. How dare you talk to me like that? I'm your father, you little, he screamed, but his voice was shaking now because he knew exactly what I was threatening. Father, you've been my financial dependent for 5 years. Respect is earned, and you've done nothing but take my money while treating me like garbage. Well, guess what? The Bank of Pedro is officially closed. I grabbed my jacket, looked around the table at all these people who'd just been laughing at me and said, enjoy figuring out how to keep a roof over your heads without this failure's help. Walking out felt like the most liberating moment of my entire life. The drive home was surreal. For the first time in years, I felt actually free. No more walking on eggshells, no more financial stress, no more pretending that being someone's verbal punching bag was somehow noble or necessary. The next morning, I did exactly what I'd promised. Canceled every automatic payment, mortgage, electricity, water, gas, internet, car insurance, everything. But I wasn't done. I pulled up all those WhatsApp messages from when Dad borrowed the 400,000 pesos for his truck. Screenshots of him begging for help, promising to pay me back, talking about how grateful he was. Then I drafted a formal demand letter requesting immediate repayment of the loan with reasonable interest according to the national bank rates. I sent it certified mail return receipt, requested professional, legally binding, and absolutely devastating because I knew he didn't have 400,000 pesos lying around. But here's where it gets interesting. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from my cousin Maria. Turns out Dad had been calling extended family members, spinning this elaborate story about how I'd turned against the family and was trying to destroy them out of jealousy. According to his version, I was bitter about my brother's happiness and decided to take it out on him and Mom. He was telling people that he'd been supporting me for years, and I'd suddenly decided to bite the hand that feeds me. Maria called because she'd talked to Aunt Carmen and gotten the real story. Pedro, I had no idea you were supporting them. Uncle Juan made it sound like you were some kind of ungrateful leech. I'm so sorry we believed him. Honestly, Pedro, she said during that call, I always wondered how Uncle could afford that house on a gardener's salary. Now it all makes sense. This cabron was living off his own son while treating him like shit. What kind of father does that? That's when I realized how deep this went. Dad hadn't just been abusing me at home. He'd been poisoning my reputation with extended family for years, probably to cover up his own failures. The next few months were absolutely wild. Dad went through what I can only describe as the 5 stages of grief. Except instead of acceptance, he just cycled back to anger over and over again. He actually told people I was just being dramatic and would come crawling back once I realized how much family meant to me. This cabron genuinely believed I was bluffing about cutting off the money. Reality hit when the first utility shutoff notice arrived. That's when he moved to bargaining. Suddenly, I was getting voicemails about how family forgives and we could work this out like men. The voicemails were pathetic but also hilarious. Pedro mijo, I know we've had our differences, but this is getting out of hand. Your mother is worried sick. Just call me back so we can figure this out like adults. When I didn't respond, he shifted to anger. The voicemails got nasty fast. You're dead to me, Pedro. You think you're so smart with your fancy job, but you're nothing without family. You'll regret this for the rest of your miserable life, you ungrateful piece of shit. My brothers tried reaching out, but their approach was basically, both sides are wrong. Let's all just get along. Easy to say when you weren't the one getting used for decades while keeping everyone financially afloat. Gonzalo was the worst. Remember him, Dad's golden boy who could do no wrong? About 3 weeks after I cut off the payments, he calls me up with this self-righteous attitude that made my blood boil. Pedro, what the hell is wrong with you? Dad's panicking now. Mom's crying every day. You've destroyed this family over what some stupid comment at dinner. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Some stupid comment. Gonzalo, he's been treating me like garbage for 30 years while I paid for his entire lifestyle. Where have you been? Come on, man. That's just how Dad is. He doesn't mean anything by it. You know he loves you, but this is cruel. Mom could end up on the streets because of your tantrum. A tantrum? This dude just called decades of financial and emotional abuse a tantrum. You know what, Gonzalo? If you're so concerned about Mom and Dad, why don't you step up? You've got a good job, a house. Start writing some checks. Long pause then. It's not that simple, Pedro. I have my own family to think about. Kids are expensive. The mortgage. Or stop right there. It wasn't simple for me either, but I did it for 5 years. You want them taken care of? Take care of them yourself. But Gonzalo wasn't hearing it. In his mind, I was the villain who'd abandoned family when they needed me most. You're being selfish, Pedro. This isn't who you are. Mom raised us better than this, and that's when I lost it completely. Mom raised us, dude. I helped raise you while Dad was calling me worthless. I was making sure you had clean clothes for school. You were the golden child. I was the insurance policy. Look, I get that Dad was hard on you sometimes. Don't get me hard on you sometimes. He dismantled me while you cheered. Another long pause. When Gonzalo spoke again, his voice was different, colder. Fine, be that way. But when Mom ends up in some crappy apartment because her son abandoned her, that's on you. I hope your pride is worth it. You know what's really on me, Gonzalo? Finally growing a spine. Something you might want to try someday, you ass-kissing coward. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then came the response to my demand letter, and that's when I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. Dad's reply was pure gold. A handwritten letter full of rage and entitlement. I don't owe you anything, ungrateful brat. That money was a gift to help family. You can't just demand it back because you're having a tantrum. I'm your father, and I don't have to pay you back for helping your own family. Perfect. Not only was he refusing to pay, he was doing it in writing while contradicting his own WhatsApp messages, where he'd explicitly called it a loan and promised repayment. I took his letter, my screenshots, the bank records showing the transfers, and marched straight to a lawyer's office in Zona Rosa, filed a civil lawsuit for 400,000 pesos, plus interest, legal fees, and court costs in small claims court. When he got served, he went ballistic, screaming about ungrateful sons and family betrayal, while all the neighbors stared at him. Mom's situation was heartbreaking, though. She kept calling, crying about how she didn't know what to do. Part of me felt terrible for her, but she'd enabled Dad's behavior for years and chosen to stay silent while he destroyed me emotionally. When I offered to help her leave him, she actually defended the guy. He's my husband, Pedro. Marriage means sticking together through hard times. Yeah, well, being someone's son used to mean something too, but that didn't stop him from treating me like garbage. Fast forward to now 3 years after that dinner. Reddit. I'm not gonna lie, life has been absolutely incredible. Remember how Dad always said I'd die alone? Well, He was wrong. I met Sophia at a work conference about 18 months ago. She's a financial advisor. Brilliant, funny, and get this. She actually thinks my dedication to family before I cut them off shows I'm loyal and responsible. We clicked immediately, started dating, and got married 6 months ago. The wedding was small but perfect, just her family and the few relatives of mine who actually supported me through this mess. Sophia is actually the one who helped me see how toxic my family situation really was. When I told her about growing up with Dad, she looked at me like I was describing some kind of horror movie. Pedro, that's not normal father-son behavior. That's systematic abuse. Having someone validate what I'd experienced for decades was incredibly healing. Maria flew in from Guadalajara to be there, and seeing her happy face in the crowd honestly meant more to me than having 100 fake relatives who'd spent years watching Dad tear me down. During her speech at the reception, she said something that still gives me chills. I've watched Pedro carry his family on his shoulders for years while they treated him like he was the problem. Now I get to watch him build something beautiful with someone who actually appreciates what an incredible man he is. Sophia's family welcomed me with open arms, too. Her dad actually told me he respected how I'd handled a difficult situation with grace, something my own father never managed to say in 34 years. The contrast between families was stark. Sophia's dad asks about my work because he's genuinely interested, not looking for ammunition to tear me down. Her mom includes me in family jokes without making me the punchline. Her siblings treat me like an actual brother instead of a convenient target for their own insecurities. My business took off too. I left the company job and started my own electrical contracting business, specializing in small businesses in Roma Norte. Turns out when you're not constantly stressed about family drama, you can actually focus on building something amazing. We're pulling in more money than I ever imagined possible. The business success felt like the ultimate vindication. Here I was, the failure son, who would never amount to anything, running a successful company with a growing client base and excellent reputation. Every new contract felt like another middle finger to Dad's decades of negativity. Word got around the family about how well I was doing, which must have burned Dad's ass even more. Not only had I escaped his control, I was thriving without him. Mom finally left Dad about 1 year ago and moved in with me and Sophia. She's like a different person now, happier, healthier, actually standing up for herself. Turns out when you remove a toxic person from your life, everyone around them starts healing too. She told me some things about their marriage that honestly made me realize how much worse Dad was than I even knew. Apparently, he'd been emotionally abusing her for decades, controlling money, isolating her from friends, the whole playbook. My financial support had been enabling not just his laziness, but his abuse of her too. I stayed because I thought that's what wives are supposed to do. But he was never a husband or a father. Watching what he did to you, how he treated my son, I realized that wasn't love. That was just fear and habit. Having Mom live with us has been incredible. She helps around the house, gets along great with Sophia, and actually seems to enjoy life for the first time in decades. My brothers are still keeping their distance from me, but I hear through the grapevine that none of them are helping Dad either. Funny how when the free money dried up suddenly, everyone discovered they were too busy to deal with family. Simon apparently tried to guilt-trip Gonzalo into stepping up financially, but Gonzalo shut that down real quick. Pedro was the one making all that money, he reportedly said. I can't afford to support Dad like he did. Oh, and the lawsuit. I won. Obviously, Dad didn't even show up to court. He was too sick to defend himself. Judge awarded me the full 400,000 pesos plus interest at the national bank rate, court costs, and attorney fees. Total judgment was about 467,000 pesos. Of course, collecting from a homeless man is pretty much impossible, but that wasn't really the point. The point was the principle, and having a legal document that officially declared him a debtor who owed me money felt better than any therapy session ever could. But the real satisfaction came from the wage garnishment order. See, Dad eventually got a part-time job at some landscaping company, probably making minimum wage, and I had his paycheck garnished for the judgment. Every 2 weeks, he gets reminded that his failure son legally owns a piece of his pathetic income. Damn, Cousin Maria said when I told her about the wage garnishment. You really said fuck around and find out in the most legal way possible. Uncle thought he could treat you like shit forever and never face consequences. Now he's literally paying for it. That's some next-level petty, and I'm here for it. Life was going so well that I honestly hadn't thought about Dad in months. Sophia and I were planning a vacation to Playa del Carmen. The business was expanding, Mom was thriving, everything was perfect. Then yesterday my phone rang. Unknown number. "Pedro, it's your father." My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 3 years, and he sounded different. Older, weaker, defeated. "I don't know if you've heard, but I'm sick, really sick. The doctors say it's cancer, and it's not looking good. I know we've had our differences, but you're my son. I'd like to see you before it's too late. Also," he continued, his voice getting weaker, "I was hoping maybe you could stop the wage garnishment. I can barely afford my medications as it is, and having my pay docked every 2 weeks, it's killing me faster than the cancer." For a moment I felt that old familiar guilt creeping in. He's dying. He's your father. Maybe he's finally learned his lesson, all those thoughts that would have had me rushing to his bedside a few years ago. But then I remembered everything. The decades of abuse, the humiliation, the way he poisoned my relationships and tried to destroy my reputation even after I'd supported him for years. The cancer revelation didn't change what he'd done to me. If anything, it highlighted how he was still trying to manipulate me even from his deathbed. "Dad," I said, and my voice was steady as a rock. "I heard you the first time you said I was dead to you. Turns out you were right about something after all, and about the wage garnishment that continues until every peso is paid back. A deal's a deal. Pedro, please. I'm dying. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? You had 34 years to find it in your heart to be a decent father. Now you have cancer to keep you company instead of a son who actually gave a damn. Seems like one of us is dying alone." And I hung up. Sophia found me sitting in the kitchen afterward, just staring at my phone. When I told her what happened, she held my hand and said, "I'm proud of you. You don't owe him anything." She's right. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for toxic parents to change, to apologize, to finally become the parent they needed. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is accept that it's never going to happen. Dad made his choices. He chose cruelty over kindness, abuse over love, pride over family. Now he gets to face the consequences alone, just like he left me alone for all those years when I needed a father's support. I'm not going to his funeral when the time comes. I'm not going to pretend we had some deathbed reconciliation for the sake of family peace. I'm going to keep building my beautiful life with people who actually love and respect me. Some might call that cold, but I call it justice.